Completing a Stuart triple expansion engine, this one's part 29. Stainless steel dome head nuts. Rethreading existing ones to fit the 4BA threads on top of the columns. First, a couple of questions. Why do I want to fit stainless steel dome head nuts on top of the columns? The answer to that one is simple: because they don't go rusty. And I have a bag full of them in the workshop that I bought a while ago. The ordinary 4BA nuts that were originally fitted to the tops of the columns were far too big, and the main problem with these nuts at the top of the columns is there isn't much space. Even when fitting the smaller stainless steel dome head nuts, I won't be able to use an ordinary socket or even a nut spinner because they're too big. There really isn't much room where the threads on top of the columns finish and the mahogany starts. And this situation will be made even worse when I fit the metal cladding. Here are a collection of 8 stainless steel domed nuts. The problem is they are not 4BA. As I commence the drilling of these, tapping size for 4BA, I'm already beginning to think whether or not this was a good idea. I have a sneaking feeling that this is Chinese stainless steel, and it really is hard stuff. Really, I should have bitten the bullet and made some from some stainless steel bar stock, but no, I'm going to commence and see how many taps I break. I'm using the Myford for this because it's smaller and therefore a little bit more sensitive, and if you watch the tap you will see it start to twist slightly. Not now, because I'm actually winding the chuck in the opposite direction to release the tap. And that is one done. We now have a very small stainless steel dome head 4BA nut. And when I fit the nut to the top of the column, yes, I think it looks okay. 1 down and 7 to go. Here I'm drilling the second one. And I have to admit this is not a pleasant job, and I'm feeling quite nervous while simultaneously perspiring profusely. While I'm showing this repetition, and I don't like repetition, I would be no good in a mass production environment, I'll tell you something interesting. Last night I made a very old compilation video public for YouTube viewers. And this morning, when I waded through all the comments, a couple of them made me realise that over the years my voice has lowered in pitch. And this in conjunction with the fact that I use a very expensive microphone setup now, whereas in the early days I used any old microphone I had to hand. It's a combination of technology and old age that makes my voice sound deeper now
than it once was.
The threads on the top of these columns have always been tight. They were tight when I put standard 4BA nuts on them, and they seem even tighter now I'm threading this stainless steel, which doesn't thread very well. To make the 4BA threads on top of the columns a little bit more accurate, I'm using 4BA dye to just chase the thread a little bit. Most of my dies are slightly adjustable. You can close them or open them, very slightly, but just enough to make a difference. This one isn't, it's just fixed at 4BA size, and it's ideal for this job. Surprisingly though, it is removing a tiny amount of metal, so the threads were a little bit oversized. Once I'd completed this job on all 8 of the columns, I noticed that the standard 4BA nuts that I was using were a much better fit. They were originally quite tight. The length of the columns varies very slightly, so here I'm using my Proxxon motor tool fitted with a coarse drum sander just to trim the ends and make them all the same length. I'm only wishing to remove metal from the top of the columns, and I'm being really careful not to mark the main cylinder castings. The one I've just done isn't quite short enough yet. I will revisit that. Some of the more intensely picky viewers will be thinking, but there's grit and metal particles going down into the bearings of the engine. Oh no, end of civilization as we know it. My advice is to just sit back, relax and breathe, because before I run this engine, I will be putting it in my ultrasonic cleaner, where all foreign bodies and particles will be blasted into oblivion. The ends of the columns look a bit better now, and the nuts that I'm rethreading fit perfectly on top of them. In this clip I'm using my scriber to poke away some mahogany that I've just cut with a Stanley knife, which was far too close to where the nuts are going to be. Because I'm not an engineer and my brain works in a different way, there was no way could I sit and make 8 of these. So I thought I would do something else. The nut spinner is too big. Once the cladding is fitted, this isn't going to fit around the nut. so it's over to the Myford for a different job. I've put the nut spinner in the chuck, and what I'm doing now is turning it to a smaller diameter. I've been doing some fine tuning on this Myford, so now it turns steel and brass or anything quite well, with a much better finish. All I really did was adjust the jib strip in the cross slide, which was a bit slack. And now the cross slide feels a lot firmer. I also took out some of the backlash in the screw, and it is cutting all together a lot better. I really like this Myford, and I can say that in all honesty, I wasn't given it by Myford Limited. It was a private sale and I bought it using my own money. And if you've watched the series on the Myford, you will also realise that I bought a tool post. Here's the finish that I got on the piece of steel, and I think it's quite good. I didn't use any lubricant, and it really would have been better had I have speeded up the lathe, because the carbide tip tool would have cut a lot better. To finish the job, I'm removing the sharp edge with a needle file. And now I'll be able to use this tool to tighten these nuts when I finally assemble the engine for the last time. I think I will mount the cylinders onto the columns though before I fit the cladding, just in case. Here, as I'm fitting these nuts in position, I'm being very careful not to over-tighten them. I need to be certain that these gunmetal bearings that hold the reversing shaft are in the correct positions, because they are slightly different. This will be okay for now, and it's looking good. I'm glad I decided to do this. But as I said at the beginning, it's easier to make your own stainless steel dome nuts from scratch. I may do a feature showing how to do this. It's quite simple. You may be wondering why the engine is spinning round. That's because it's sat on my turntable. I occasionally use this for getting shots of engines so you can see them all the way around. This turntable is called a Lazy Susan, and I think you put it in the middle of a table with a segmented food container, so as you rotate it, you can pick out what you need. And that concludes this episode. Time for me to go. I'd like to say, as I always do, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.